Welcome. I'm Councillor Mallorca and Mayor of Worcester, and I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's full council. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. And this evening, I would like to invite the Council to stand and observe 1 minute silence for Brenda Sheridan, past Mayoress, who passed away on the 9th of October 2024. Thank you. Please be seated. And do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Madam Mayor, apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Gregson and Round.
And do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. On an agenda item later on, I'm a member of PED as well, and I'm also a school governor.
Thank you. Any further? No? Okay, thank you. But if we go through the minutes, we have two sets. So if you first of all go through the minutes from the last council meeting, and if we go through page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, page 18, page 19 and page 20. Yeah, excellent. And then if we can move on to the minutes from the Extraordinary Council, which was on the 15th of October. And here we just have page 21 and page 22. Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 4. And I'd just like to go through Mayor's communications. And obviously with Brenda Sheridan, I would like to say a few words to mark the passing of former Mayor of Worcester, Brenda Sheridan. Brenda was a city councillor for the St Clement ward, representing Labour from 1986 to 2002. The highlight of her 16 years on the City Council came in 1989, when as Mayor she welcomed Queen Elizabeth II to the Guildhall as part of the royal visit to mark the 800th anniversary of the granting of the City Charter. Brenda worked at Worcester University for many years. She was actively involved in many community organisations, including Worcester Municipal Charities, Worcester Arts Council, Worcester Arts Workshop and St Richard's Hospice. She was a former director of Home Start South, Worcestershire, was chair of Governors at Oldbury Park School, and I was pleased to be able to attend her funeral last month and listen to the wonderful tributes that were paid to her. And I will now invite group leaders to speak if they wish to. I think Councillor Denham first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. How lucky is Worcester that Brenda Sheridan dedicated her life to our city, despite being a Yorkshire woman. She undertook teacher training at Homerton College in Cambridge and then moved to Worcester in 1962. For the next 25 years, Brenda was at Worcester College of Higher Education, rising to head of infant education. Thank you to Ian Cragen for some of the information here, who was celebrant at Brenda's funeral, which was very much a celebration of a life long lived. And she was seminal in so number of our key city institutions. Within 3 years of arriving in Worcester, she was helping to found the Swan Theatre and dancing in its first production. In 1985, she became a magistrate on the South Worcestershire bench, adding chairing the Lord Chancellor's advisory subcommittee to select magistrates. And she, amongst many others, she persuaded and recruited my husband to become a magistrate. As has been said, Brenda was elected to the City Council as the Labour member for St Clement's Ward. She was involved in the founding of the Play Council, which she chaired. She was active in the Citizens Advice Bureau, the Arts Workshop, Town Twinning, and also municipal charities. As Mayor of Worcester, I don't know how she did it, her term of office managed to encompass 3 royal visits, which is quite an achievement of itself. And a further legacy from her mayoralty is that she commissioned the lightweight mayor's chain because she found the main one, the historic one, to be too heavy for her because she was only a small woman who packed a punch, as it were. And during the 1990s, Brenda sort of added to her portfolio of public service. She chaired Worcester Home Start for many years, which was, I think a number of us remember. She joined the Governors of St Richard's Hospice at an early stage. And as the Mayor said, you know, governor at 2 local schools. And when she sort of allegedly retired, she's had many hobbies, including Worcester Symphony Orchestra, theatre, travel, gardening, and of course the Labour Party. It's not a hobby, it's a lifelong vocation. And her support was unwavering. And she was active to the end of her life, always reading her papers before meetings, and always making thoughtful contributions to any decision. She was always open to conversation with a smile and a twinkle in her eyes. And Brenda's long life, 92 years, was dedicated to public service and to helping others. And she will have touched the lives of many Worcester people in all her different roles over the years as a teacher, a counsellor, a magistrate, a musician, a trustee. So thank you to Brenda for a life well lived.
Councillor Denham, thank you. And would any other group leaders like to speak? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair, Mayor. I only know of Brenda through actually Liz, who tells me that she retired 22 years ago, and her greatest forte was actually outside the council, where she sat on and really contributed to more outside bodies than anyone else that she could remember. Chair of Play Council, has been told, a great educationalist, caring about children's development, and she was also a chair of Homestar Municipal Councils, and was a trustee of St Richard's during the years where it was being set up and registered as a charity, and we all know how important that is, especially now and to anybody who's been touched by St Richard's and the work they do there. So it's as Lynn said, a wonderful, dedicated life for public service, and warmly remembered by her peers at the time, Sue, Ken and Liz. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes, thank you. Thanks. Okay, on another sad topic really, I'd also like to pay tribute on behalf of the council to former Worcester News journalist Mike Grundy, who died at the end of October at the age of 86. Mike was a leading journalist at our local newspaper, the Worcester News, for many years, covering local government affairs. He probably spent more hours than any of us attending council meetings here at the Guildhall. He earned a reputation as a dedicated and diligent reporter and was well respected by members of all political parties. Thank you. I'll go further through the announcements. With the Victorian Fair, I would like to say on behalf of the council a big thank you to all the staff who played a part in making this year's Worcester Victorian Fair such a great success. A huge amount of work went into it, I know, and it provides a huge boost to our city's economy, and it was wonderful to see our city centre so bustling. I think we were expecting around about 150,000 visitors, and it brings in about 7 million, so thank you. Then if a reminder, obviously it's the 10th today. Tomorrow we've got the Mayor's Charity Christmas concert here at 7:30 p.m. and it's in the Assembly Room. Tickets are still available from the Civic Office or Tourist Information Officer, and I think you could still get them on the night if you'd like to. Then moving into next year, dates for 2025. We've got the Holocaust Memorial event on Monday the 27th of January, and that is in the Assembly Room at the Guildhall, and the start time will be confirmed. And we have the civic service slightly later than usual due to the general election, which is on the 26th of January at 4 p.m. Invitations have been sent out, so please do support this important civic event. Furthermore, we have the Mayor's Charity Banquet, and this will have a Pride and Prejudice theme, and it's on the 28th of March at 6:45 p.m, and formal invitations will be sent out shortly. Moving on to the Armed Forces Covenant, I'm thrilled and honoured to be able to invite the Council to renew the Armed Forces Covenant tonight. Assuming the recommendation elsewhere on the agenda is agreed, the Covenant will be signed before the close of the meeting. And refreshments, once the meeting is finished, you're all cordially invited to join me for refreshments, which will be served in the Mayor's Parlour. Thank you. So next we move on to agenda item 5, and it's public participation. This evening we have 4 members of the public who've registered to speak. So we'll invite you all to come forward one at a time.
The first speaker isn't attended, so we move to the next.
Okay, so the first speaker hasn't attended, so I shall move on to Melissa Poulton.
Evening, Council. Let's start with simple math. It's been 378 days since I stood in front of this council. Many of the members that were there are still here. I asked a simple question about what is council doing to support trans people in Worcester, especially after the attack my friend and I had at the train station. Council got back to us saying it's a police matter. Going back to maths again, it has been 370 days since the former member of Parliament for Redditch attacked me for being who I am. Where did it happen? Online. This chamber. In Worcester, what did this council do? You ignored me. Councillors in this chamber ignored me for being who I am, for being targeted, harassed and marginalised. hate to see what you do to cisgendered people. This side of the council completely ignored me. The middle, Lib Dems, they triggered me with their sending a representative who was more concerned with their wife's feelings than trans or non-binary people. And then, and then the other side. That side of the council doesn't respond. That side, you just traumatised me. Like you did last week. Everything I'd done for the party, and not even a thank you. Not only did you excommunicate me, you told people that I left because of an old social media account. I left because the party that didn't support marginalised people, especially when it comes to trans people. Which brings me back to the question that I would like to answer. Will you support, let me rephrase that, what is the council doing to improve accessibility across the city? Will it ask their workers not to park their vehicles on the paths? Will the council start using inclusive language? Also, will you support both able-bodied and non-able-bodied to be a more inclusive city? Thank you.
Sir Bolton, thank you. I will ensure that a written reply is provided for you. Thank you. I would now like to call John Newey to speak.
My name is John Newey and I'm the Chief Exec of Worcester Community Trust.
And I'm Caitlin Palmer, the Project Manager for Dawn.
Dawn is WCT's one-to-one community-based by and for domestic support service. I am here to speak to item number 7 that has been put forward by Sarah Murray and Ed Kimberley. And on behalf of the people who benefit from our work, we thank you both. Firstly, we want to thank our current funders and commissioners. Without their support, there would have been 1,050 individuals trapped in unsafe relationships, 150 who could be dead through suicide or homicide, and 1,427 children who would be caught in violent or abusive households since 2020. Dawn's waiting list is now closed indefinitely. The contracts that support this community-based domestic support service will come to an end on the 31st of March 25. To safely manage those on the waiting list, we can no longer take on any more clients. One-to-one community-based work is seen by those people who access these services as one of the most important pathways to escaping abusive relationships, but it is not a statutory obligation. WCT continues to explore every angle to maintain the current level of service, but we have exhausted most avenues. Without further funding, we will see a reduction in support from 400 individuals per year to a maximum of 100. This will mean 220 children each year will continue to live in abusive or violent households. An additional 15 to 20 individuals per year will be at risk of serious harm or death at the hands of their perpetrators or their own. Dawn has grown since 2020 to become an all-round holistic service which has lived experience-led groups, group training and awareness raising and signposting to effect long-term change. When these contracts come to an end, we will most likely have a vital but single one-to-one worker. We are in a national epidemic of domestic abuse, with 22,000 plus individuals in Worcestershire alone experiencing domestic abuse every year. These 300 less adults and 600 less children may never get the opportunity to live a safer life. They may never find the support they so desperately need at a time when support for victims is most vital. The funding is diminishing nationwide. From a local authority perspective, the loss of preventative services will quickly impact the pressure on your local GPs and A&E departments. It will affect the continued pressure on your police, prison and probationary services. It will increase your budget spent on children entering care and antisocial behaviour across your wards. It will reduce the safety of the city predominantly for women and girls and leave them with a reduced autonomy and limited choice of how to escape. Domestic abuse currently costs the UK £66 billion per year. However, a reduction in frontline services, this cost will rise exponentially. WCT recently commissioned an independent review of its Dawn service, and 21 referral partners and 88 clients voluntarily contributed to the study. This is testament to the importance of our staff, the individuals who access the service, and the countless partners we work with at Dawn.
Since 2023, 176 clients have given voluntary feedback after their support journey, and 100% agreed that they were listened to and believed by their project worker, and that the support they received was helpful. These are some of their voices. The support I received from Dawn has been life-saving. I was at rock bottom and used to question my own sanity. They made me realise I was getting abused, and without their support, I would not be able to get through the last year. Dawn is a truly valuable service, and without them, I am in no doubt I would not be here today. It helped me find my worth again, and ultimately myself. I'll be forever grateful, and I hope they continue to save more lives. I'm not sure I would have survived 2023 without the Dawn Project. I was in such a low place and I couldn't see the end, but they were always there for me and helped me in so many ways. I think as a man, I really struggled to find support and information to help me, but with Dawn, I felt I had finally found what I needed, and I wish I'd found the Dawn Project sooner, after months of screaming out for help and not feeling heard or supported by other organisations or government departments. I wish to express my thanks and wholehearted gratitude to their team and sing their praises. The support I received was absolutely right for me. My support worker was extremely knowledgeable about the specific abuse that I'd been through, and I truly feel that she was instrumental in my ability to leave the abuser for good this time. I am now 7 months free from abuse. They empowered me not to be a victim, but a survivor. And finally, and most simply, I would not be here today if it wasn't for Dawn. Thank you for considering this motion.
John and Caitlin, thank you. And I will ensure a written response is provided for you both. Thank you. I would now like to call Alderman Liz Smith to speak.
Is that happening? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just very briefly like to add my tribute to Brenda Sheridan, with whom I served on the council. She was, well, I have very fond memories of working with her chairmanship of the Worcester Play Council for many years. And I think there are a lot of people in Worcester who probably don't know it, but they still owe a great deal to the work that she did both on the council and outside the council as well. I come tonight as a member of the Twinning Association. You will have found a leaflet on your desk. Some of you may have had this before. If you have, you're welcome to return your copy to me. It deals with the relationship between Worcester and Gouzeaucourt village in northeastern France, and tells a very little known story, which is part of Worcester's history, about the first time that Worcester reached out to a community abroad, and explains why we're twinned with this really very small community there. It's a short read. I reckoned about 10 minutes, so please have a look at it. And just for the record, the city also has twinning arrangements with Claver in Germany, Le Vésinet in France, Commergier in Lithuania, Worcester, Massachusetts, and a friendship agreement with Vernon in France. I've listened with interest to the public speakers already tonight, and the subjects are very interesting. I'd just like to tell you very briefly about a few weeks ago when I hosted a visit of some elderly canoeists to this city. They're sportsmen and women who've seen their heyday in the 1960s and 70s, so they're all getting on in years now. We have a reunion every year, different venue, and this year it was Worcester. They stay a couple of days in a local hotel, then go for a paddle on the river for old time's sake, do a bit of sightseeing, have a meal in the evening. same format all the time. So one morning, a number of us saw those who were still able to get into and out of a canoe paddling off on the river. Those who could no longer manage this, along with some partners, made their way to the Riverside Cafe on Croft Road to await their return. I'm happy to say that it was only me who really needed the disabled facility at the cafe. Merciful, really, given the age profile of those present, because otherwise I think my mortification would have been complete on finding it out of order. And now I gather that this is an intermittent problem, and we were clearly unfortunate to find that we couldn't use the toilet there, or that particular toilet anyway, or that I couldn't use it. But speaking to the staff in the cafe, they actually couldn't remember when the toilet had been in use. Madam Mayor, I would point out that Croft Road is the pick-up and the drop-off point for coaches arriving in the city, and quite a number of visitors who travel by that means. This will be their first and their last impression of the city, apart from what they might see from the coach windows. And that impression, well, it probably doesn't always include a broken loo, but it obviously does on some occasions. I'm well aware of the expense, of the rather high expense of providing public toilets, and I'm also aware of the constrained budgets that you have to face from time to time. So I'm not here to suggest any one particular solution to this problem, but an intermittent problem, when you're the one who finds that you can't use the facility, is something which I think should be addressed, along with a number of other issues facing minority groups, as we have heard. Thank you.
Alderman Liz Smith, thank you, and I will ensure a written response is provided for you. Thank you. Okay, if we move on to agenda item 6, and we have questions. And the first question is from Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. This is for Councillor Denham. In the light of the motion passed in July, which instructed the Managing Director to work with Worcestershire County Cricket Club Board, Worcester City Council and the Environment Agency to explore flood management options and ensure the club's long-term sustainability, can you provide an update on what progress has been made on these actions at Wynyard Road, as we can see recently remains vulnerable to flooding? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The Managing Director has indeed written and in fact spoken to the MP on this matter, and as a result of that motion there was a round table meeting of key partners which took place in November and was chaired by the MP himself. I personally wasn't able to make that meeting, but the Deputy Leader of the Council was there, and the Corporate Director of Operations, Homes and Communities. So at the present moment, Council awaits the next steps from this meeting, and obviously we remain committed to working with the Cricket Club and key partners.
Thank you. And Councillor, do you have a supplementary?
I do. Yes, Councillor Denham mentioned the MP there. It was just to check whether the Managing Director had written to the MP, Mr Collins, and whether what his response is. How supportive is he of the situation? Thank you.
Well, as I said, yes, the Managing Director did write to the MP, and as a result of that letter, the MP convened a meeting that involved a number of different agencies. So people with an interest in the Cricket Club, the Environment Agency, were the County Council represented, and I think members of the cricket club, and a number of possible options were looked at as to how to ensure the sustainability of the cricket club.
Thank you. If we move on to question 2, we have a question from Councillor Ali to Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for Chair of the Communities Committee. Could the Chair of Communities Committee inform us of the current number of people on the housing waiting list in Worcester, categorised by band, and the average waiting time for a council house for a family in the highest category?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In response to Councillor Ali's questions, as of week commencing the 9th of December 2024, the housing waiting list is as follows. Band 1, which is priority, 341. Band 2, 970. Band 3, 609. Band 4, 144. Band 5, 2009, making a total of 4,073. The average waiting time for a household with children currently on the waiting list is as follows. Band 1 is 41 weeks. Band 2 is 133 weeks. Band 3 is 130 weeks. Band 4 is 92 weeks. And Band 5 is 135 weeks.
Councillor Riaz, thank you. Councillor, do you have a supplementary? Yeah.
Yes, I have. Thank you, Councillor Riaz, for answering the question. In my ward and across social media, there is a growing frustration regarding the ghost development at Shrub Hill. This development has been completed for over 6 months and it is ready for occupation, yet no one has seen any units being rented or managed by an estate agent. Residents have every right to be concerned about what is happening with these empty units, especially when there is a waiting list. As you said, there are 4,073 people, and there are more than 3 units sit vacant. Many residents who are desperately seeking housing have reached out to me and other councillors, questioning why they cannot secure a council house when many properties are left unoccupied. These units could and should be used to reduce the waiting list and unclog the housing system in Worcester. Therefore, I insist on knowing what concrete actions can Worcester City Council take to address this waiting list. Can the City Council enforce measures on developers to sell or utilise properties that remain unsold or empty?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In response to that question, Mr. Ali, unfortunately, there's no simple answer to that. I'm just as disturbed as you are, and as many members would be, that we have a housing waiting list of over 4,000 people, and with people having no realistic hope of ever getting on the housing ladder from a council perspective. What is really disappointing is that this block of almost 326 flats has deliberately been withheld from the market. The question I'd like to ask publicly on behalf of Worcester City, and I'm sure many of my residents and your residents, is that the developer must come clean on what he intends to do with these units. Why are they not being sold to help release valuable housing stock so people can move on, and that could address our housing crisis here. That may free up some valuable valuable housing in the private sector that might help reduce our waiting list and get people access to the private housing market. As to what the council could do, my ambition has always been to take control of this situation by actively looking for ways of building, owning or co-creating our own units so that we can slowly chip away at that problem. We're not going to solve the issue overnight, but we have to have the intention, the will and the ambition to do so, and this administration is determined to take the lead in that way. It's small units, small numbers, and eventually we can tackle the bigger problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Councillor Lawrenson for Councillor Denham.
Thank you, Mayor. The current MP for Worcester has been justifiably criticised for not establishing an office in Worcester as early as he should have done. Please could you explain why there has been such a delay?
the leader of Worcester City Council has no responsibility for the MP's office.
Councillor Lawrence, and do you have a supplementary?
I do indeed, thank you. I've contacted the MP for Worcester several times since he was elected, and I've not received a single reply. I've spoken with other people in Worcester who are also disappointed not to have heard back from their MP. What can you do to persuade our MP to respond to residents and councillors, whatever their political affiliation and issues might be? Thank you.
I could repeat exactly what I said before. I think it's interesting to observe that when there's a change of control within the City Council and a change of leadership, we retain the entire officer corps and you know, business continues with a change of shape or direction. When an MP from a different political party is elected, they have to start absolutely from scratch to obtain an office, to hire staff, and without the benefit of an HR department or a legal advice department or property advice.
Thank you. And Councillor Lawrence, have a further question for Councillor Denham?
Thank you, Mayor. What flags have been flown on the Guildhall and in Cathedral Square since the start of 2021?
Thank you. Flags flown at the Guildhall since January 2021 are the Union flag, the Commonwealth flag and the Armed Forces flag. Flags flown at Cathedral Square, we've only got records during this year, not previous records. So that's been the Union flag, the Ukraine flag, the Worcestershire County flag, the Pride flag, Black History flag, Windrush flag, flag of peace and St George's flag.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence, and do you have a supplementary?
I do indeed, thank you. Thank you for your response, Councillor Denham. Councils in Sheffield, Rotherham, Barnsley and Rochdale flew the Palestinian flag on the 29th of November to mark the date when, in 1947, the United Nations formally adopted the plan to partition Palestine. Would you, as leader of this council, be in favour of flying the Palestinian flag above the Guildhall and in Cathedral Square?
Within this council, there are rules and requirements around what flags can be flown. Flags flown at the Guildhall are in accordance with the guidance published by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. And that guidance states that there are designated days when the Union flag must be flown on UK governments by command of His Majesty the King. UK governments are also encouraged to fly the Union flag. The guidance also states that where UK government buildings have only one flagpole, the Union flag should be flown every day, except on certain occasions when other flags may be flown, and including, but not limited to, the United Kingdom, the Armed Forces Day flag, the Commonwealth flag, county and other local flags, and other flags which may promote civic pride. In recent years, the previously listed flags, as I say, have been flown. Requests from councillors and members of the public to fly other flags are considered by the managing director and officers with delegated authority.
Thank you. Next, we have a Question from Councillor Lewin for Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is about empty homes, and we've just had a question about that. So I just thought I'd just say what the point of this is. It's basically, could the Communities Committee look at reviewing the government policy on the premium on homes so that we can bring it down from 2 years to 1? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Lewin, for your question. The answer that I've received on that is that the empty homes premium has previously been considered by the Policy and Resources Committee, not the Communities Committee, as constitutionally it relates to the setting of council tax. Worcester City Council sets the policy on empty homes premiums for revenues and benefits to change their charges, and the last report surrounding an increase to the empty homes premium was last considered at the Policy and Resources Committee in 2019. And the approach taken by the private sector housing team in relation to the long-term empty homes will be included in the revised private sector housing strategy, which is due to be presented at the Communities Committee in January 25. Hope that's okay.
Yes.
Do you have a supplementary?
I do. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Riaz. That's really useful. I know that there's a lot of things that go on with different committees. My supplementary is that I'd really like to thank the City Council's hardworking problem property team for bringing several long-term empty homes back into use in the Arboretum, because this approach is far more environmentally friendly than building the equivalent number of new homes. But I am concerned that this service, along with the wider work of the planning enforcement officers as a non-statutory service, is at risk in the future due to the council needing to save money to balance books. And I know that Councillor Riaz value the work of this team as well, and I'm sure he agrees that it is time to take more action on empty homes, as we've just described. So would he confirm that he will basically fight to keep this team? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Lewin, for the supplementary question. I mean, each of our workers in this council do a valuable job in their own respect. So, you know, we would all, in a perfect world, be fighting for every job that's them going and protecting our frontline services. So who's to say what's around the corner? I mean, the issue, I think, around empty homes, I think, coming back to your original point, in terms of that, I think we've been down this road before where we've requested and looked at the number of empty properties within the city, and a significant piece of work has been done in trying to bring those to ground. And it was concluded, if I remember correctly, that the amount of time invested in trying to bring some of these properties back into crime wasn't as cost efficient as we originally thought, hence the situation that we've got there, purely because of probate and wills and things like that that have kind of got in the way. So the intention behind your and to your original question is absolutely fine, and completely understand that. But it's that, will it achieve the results that we want it to achieve and as quickly as we can in terms of realising those homes? Probably not, because of that report that we've done kind of before, which has shown that the amount of effort put in doesn't equate to the results that we need in terms of bringing those properties back in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to notices of motion, and this is where we consider notices of motion that have been submitted in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 8. And the first motion is Age Friendly Worcester, which is being proposed by Councillor Lewin. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I'm presenting this motion for Worcester to become an age-friendly community under the World Health Organisation's framework. It's an initiative that looks to ensure that our city supports our ageing population. Projections show that within 2 decades, 1 in 4 of us will be over 65, and at the same time, there is a growing divide in experiences of ageing, with the poorest people living shorter lives and spending many more years in bad health. If we view everything within a community through the lens of an older person's perspective, issues like full accessibility and inclusion for them means that every person can enjoy full accessibility and inclusion, including younger people with mobility issues and parents with children, for example. So I really believe that we must act now to adapt and create a city that meets the needs of all residents, as if we can't meet the needs of older people, then everyone loses out. Older residents bring invaluable skills, experience and perspectives to our communities, yet their contributions are often underappreciated. And research also shows that ageism is harmful on individuals and communities, and instead we can promote a positive narrative about ageing, one that celebrates the confidence, experience and contributions of older residents. But to create an age-inclusive city, we must engage older residents in decision-making processes, ensuring that their voices shape the solutions that affect their lives. What I really care about is placing the voices of older residents at the heart of our decision-making, ensuring that our city reflects their needs and aspirations so that they can continue to contribute and take a leading role where they live. So the Age-Friendly Communities Framework provides a strategic approach to fostering an inclusive and supportive environment, and it also, for the Council, provides valuable resources, expertise and a network of peers to tackle shared challenges. This approach empowers communities to learn, innovate and implement meaningful changes effectively. You know, in Worcester, we have strong foundations already through the efforts of public, private and voluntary sectors, but adopting a framework could create a more cohesive and impactful results to enhance the city's inclusivity and support for all its residents. So this motion is an opportunity for Worcester to lead in supporting its ageing population. Let's create a city where everyone, regardless of age, can live with dignity, purpose and pride. I urge you to endorse this motion and help shape a brighter, more inclusive future for our city. Mayor, I do have an amendment, if that's okay. Yeah, so I just want to be very clear that I really want this motion to be carried. There are two aspects to it. It's the community, the champion, where at the moment we have a champion for the young, but we don't have a champion for the elderly. And it's also that it goes to a committee. I did specify the Communities Committee. It doesn't have to be the Communities Committee. It's a relevant committee. So basically, I'd like this motion, I think I had 2 points at the end. And if we just word it that the whole of it will go to the relevant committee, I'd be very happy.
So the amendment you're proposing is just for a change, that it doesn't have to be the Communities Committee at the end, but everything else is as read.
Yeah, so the whole proposal can go to the relevant committee. Thank you.
I understand Councillor Agar, you're to second, but obviously we've had the amendment. So.
Yes, I think we're very happy with the amendment and I'm sympathetic to the general thrust of the motion, but it does need to go to the relevant committee for a detailed discussion of it. Yeah, I'm sure we already have an equality, inclusion and diversity champion. I'm sure would be very willing to look into this in partnership with the other members of the committee. So very happy to second on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor Agar. Would anyone like to speak on the motion? Oops, Councillor Norfolk, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I welcome the initiative of an age-friendly city, and I think, you know, along with anybody that wants to volunteer to be the age-friendly champion, will find a willing partner in this equality, diversity and inclusion champion. Thank you very much. I too recommend the motion.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Holmes?
Yes, I'd just like to say that I would like to support this motion as well. In my time when I was mayor last year, there was a great deal of work which has been done already, not just by the City Council, but by many bodies, including people like Age UK, but also bodies like Worcester Wheels. There's an amazing amount of work which goes on in the city supporting older people. And I think it's important that we work with those organisations who do such fantastic work in the city to support our more elderly people. So yes, I'd like to just support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Stephen, thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. As a city ward representative of a city ward that has a number of elderly residents of varying abilities, I do think it's something that we should be considering. Particularly Worcester Wheels is homed in Claines, and there are a number. I'm impressed during COVID how many local people were caring for each other and bringing support, and it is indeed the elderly quite often that have the time to volunteer and do so much for the even more elderly in preparation, I suppose, for building that network. So I'm impressed constantly by the support network that they form themselves, and I think it is only right that as a city we use our committee system properly to provide the support that they need as well.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Would anyone else like to speak on the motion? Councillor Riaz, yes, you did say so.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I was a member of the public reading this motion, Madam Mayor, you would have thought that actually Worcester doesn't do anything for the elderly. And that's the kind of danger in the motion in here. And I think it's really, really important to point out that we do a fantastic amount from a city perspective, that we've never neglected our older people, and that we've got a significant amount going on within our city, within the city that looks after and understands. And particularly if you're saying in the council notes that in point 1 and under section 10.1 to take those needs seriously. It's like, you know, is there an example that anybody can give where we haven't taken those needs seriously and where we haven't addressed those issues? So I think there's just there is a danger of people seeing that actually as a city council we're not taking those needs seriously. We are. This is just this motion reinforces the fact that and enshrines in there that we're, you know, taking it to the next level. I think that's the point I wanted to really make in here, is that if anybody fresh is thinking, hang on a second, it's as if we've neglected older people for the last, you know, ever since the council existed. So that's the point I really wanted to make in terms of that. Actually, there's a huge amount going on in the city that looks after older people, and the city council play their part.
Thank you. Councillor Desira, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Two quick things I'd just like to say to echo the hugely valuable contribution of elderly people in the volunteer sector. So I deliver for Food Bank every other week, and everybody in the warehouse at Worcester Food Bank, I would say, is an elderly person, and they put a huge amount of effort into running that food bank. The other thing is most Saturdays I run the Open Door Cafe in Warndon, and that's open to everybody. It's not age restricted, but most people using it are elderly people who otherwise won't see people. You know, it's not necessarily for them about needing the food, but they absolutely want the company. And it's very good for ending social isolation in that way. So there are things going on, rightly so, and I think the idea of promoting supporting elderly people is very good. We've also, I think, got to recognise that I believe young people get neglected more than the elderly in the city as a whole. So I just want to make that point.
Councillor Desira, thank you. Do we have any more speakers? Councillor Collier, thank you.
I just wanted to add that whilst I agree with Councillor Reyes, I don't think that particularly our older people are neglected as such. I think it's about the lens with which we look through. We look at our development and our policy as a council. So there's a concept in urban planning which is called 880 cities, which is if you design a city which is appropriate for an 8-year-old and 80-year-old, you've made a city which is fantastic for all people. And I think that kind of, really sums up the concept of the motion there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Okay, if we can move to the vote. All those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Sorry, struggling with my height to see. Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, if we move on to motion 2, and it's the Dawn project in Worcester, and it's being proposed by Councillor Murray. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank Jonathan Newey and Caitlin Palmer for attending this evening and speaking in support of this motion. I'll keep my words concise, though I confess no motion could ever be long enough to truly honour the extraordinary work that the Dawn Project do, nor the scale of the problem we face with domestic abuse. The Dawn Project is more than a service, it's a lifeline. It transforms despair into hope, silence into voices, and vulnerability into resilience. Its work reaches into the very heart of our community, supporting those whose struggles too often go unseen and unheard. I've heard calls for brevity, but how can we make light of a topic as vital as this? How can we compress into a few lines the importance of the people behind Dawn?
their dedication, compassion and impact. We cannot diminish their work with hasty words or half-hearted gestures. This motion is not long. It is essential to show that Worcester stands firm in its commitment to supporting those who need us most. I urge you to join me in passing it. Together we send a clear and powerful message. Dawn's work is not just valuable, it is indispensable. Thank you in anticipation of your support.
Councillor Murray, thank you. And Councillor Kimberley, I believe you're seconding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a very personal topic, domestic abuse, and the people who suffer it the most are often silent and unheard. I think the most empowering thing that can happen, the most empowering experience that a survivor of abuse can feel is to be heard, to be listened to be believed. And I have personally seen the benefit that Dawn has provided to residents in our community. They were very often the first place that people felt heard and were able to talk about experiences that they had had, that they were able to be believed, that they were able to be heard, and to start the journey of processing what has happened to them. Domestic abuse takes many, many different forms, and the experience of different individuals is very different. Having someone to talk to about it, having someone to refer them on to relevant activities, support groups, to provide them with access to counselling is unbelievably valuable, and it is distressing to see that Dawn's funding is under threat. I have signed the White Ribbon Pledge. I know many other colleagues have done. I would urge everyone to take the opportunity to do that when they have the chance. I also want to note that my party fought a general election on the platform of halving violence against women and girls, and women and girls are distressingly overrepresented in the figures of those who survived domestic abuse. So I wholeheartedly support this motion. I think it's a very important one that we must pass. Thank you.
Councillor Kimberley, thank you. Would anyone like to speak? Councillor Stephen?
I'd like to wholeheartedly endorse what Councillor Murray has said tonight. I give my absolute complete support to what you've said and the campaign you've done on the White Ribbon and on this issue. I've heard people talking about the great work that Dawn Project does, and I think it's an absolute disgrace that it's even a charity or a thing that you actually have to keep going back for applying for more money, that it isn't a statutory requirement and they have to keep going back cap in hand. It is completely and utterly ridiculous, and I completely support the motion. So I hope everyone else will support the motion as well. Thank you.
Councillor Stephen, thank you. Councillor Denham.
Thank you very much. I think probably I remember the beginning of the Dawn Project. Certainly when I was elected in 2012, is the earliest sort of communication I had about it, and training in domestic abuse. If I say the names Deb Fletcher and Katie Carver, they will absolutely ring bells with some colleagues that have been around a long time and were seminal in getting this unique service underway. And of course it was a successor to the Asher Centre, if people remember that, Asher Women's Centre, which is much mourned and not replaced. So the Dawn Project is a unique service. It is a life-changing service, and really important in that it prevents, or it helps deal with the trauma and the trauma for children in a family, and genuinely enables people to move on. The problem is that it's never had secure funding, because unfortunately that's not how things work. The problem is that with 14 years of austerity from a Conservative government, it's always been hand-to-mouth funding. And as the voluntary sector and charities have been commissioned to deliver services by agencies, sometimes specifically commissioned to deliver services on the cheap, if you like, that it requires a patchwork of sources of funding, charity donations, raffles, business sponsors, councillor divisional funds, Public Health, Police and Crime Commissioner, obviously are specific to Dawn and the difference that Dawn can make. And at this time of year, funding isn't yet announced for many streams. And I was looking back in my emails. Now, in the autumn of 2018, Worcester Community Trust identified the need to secure new funding streams to enable women to carry on being supported by this vital service. It's not, there is this cliff edge moment, and then hopefully every year till now, there has been continuation of funding. So with regard to the specific responsibilities of this council, we are part of South Worcester Community Safety Partnership, and they have already committed to allocate some of their funding from the Police and Crime Commissioner for one Dawn project officer from April 2025.
Councillor Denham, thank you. Councillor Agar.
Thank you. It was great to hear that there will be some follow-on funding from the Police and Crime Commissioner, who has in fact funded some of this project before. I'm a former youth work manager, YWCA trained. I worked for them running a women's centre for 8 years. So that means I saw quite a lot of young women and older ones who were experiencing domestic violence, and worked with the police officers to mitigate that and to help women disappear where necessary. I can still remember one young woman who climbed out of the window as her father came in the door. 3 days later, she went back for her younger sister, and they disappeared, and I didn't ask where they went. I knew they were being supported by the police, and thankfully, they can be supported to disappear if they need to. But we also know, don't we, that between 1 and 2 women a week are killed by violent partners or husbands or former boyfriends or whoever in a domestic setting. Now, the law is changing on that, and the Labour Party is committed to changing the law so that stiffer sentences are given to people who commit these kinds of crimes when they pick up a weapon in a domestic setting and kill somebody. And I'm pleased to hear that that's going to happen. I'm even more pleased to hear, as a former trustee of Asher Women's Centre as well, this was something that Asher pursued for years also. But with the demise of women's centres and the lack of belief in the services they can provide, services like Dawn's are absolutely essential to the safety of women in our communities. And I say women because it's over 80%, it's something like 82%, maybe 85% of these crimes are committed against women. And it's a long time before many women have the self-confidence or simply the fear to do something, to leave the situation or to seek advice. The more we can do to support them, to access advice, we really should be doing. And we should press for funding to continue for that. We've heard that some will be going into it. Let's hope that we can look for more. Thank you.
Councillor Agar, thank you. Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to obviously extend, how powerful was how difficult was it for Caitlin to come here and speak with all her trauma of what she's been through. And it really needs to be commended, obviously, how well she spoke and how calm she spoke in terms of her experience with Dawn. Absolutely agree with everybody in the room in terms of in terms of the absolute need from it. I've been well, obviously, along with Councillor Denham, been at the start of the Dawn project and seen it through, and in my mayoral year supported the Community Trust, where some of that funding was allocated to, so it's absolutely essential. We've had John Campion here before in the Communities Committee, where we've challenged him on the amount of sexual violence against women and girls in Worcester, particularly in my ward, in my previous ward in Cathedral, and the increasing number, and the two are inextricably linked, aren't they? Sexual violence and then domestic abuse, in most cases, the two are correlated. So he knows the problem. We've, as a council, explained to him the problem that we're having in the city, and that this function of Dawn is absolutely necessary. And Dawn has expanded its borders. It's not just Worcester City only, it's going into South Worcestershire and in other areas because of the absolute need for it. So, the question needs to be from us, Madam Mayor, about where is that other funding being allocated? I mean, what is more important than the situation that we have here with Dawn? And, I'm absolutely going to support this motion, but we need to be asking that question and asking the Police Crime Commissioner, where is that rest of that money? How can we get it allocated back to this project? Thank you.
Councillor Riaz, thank you. And Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, thank you to Councillor Murray for the motion, and thank you for your speakers as well. I prompted to contribute to the discussion, the debate, by Councillor Denham's reference to the Asher Centre. Back a long time ago, I worked for West Mercia Probation Service, 2006-2011. So for 5 years, I was a programmes facilitator, rehabilitation programmes, and one of which was the Integrated Domestic Abuse Programme, otherwise known as IDAP. Now, I didn't personally facilitate that programme, but some of my colleagues did. And I remember when the discussion about Asher Centre came up, the facial expressions of my colleagues told the story. They were devastated that the Asher Centre was closed. Absolutely devastated, because they knew the difference that centre had made. I echo what my colleague Councillor Stephen said about long-term funding for the project and how ridiculous it is that we need to keep looking for short-term solutions, and of course that goes for local government funding as well. So I hope that the government will listen via Jess Phillips, and I hope that John Campion, Police Crime Commissioner, will also listen. I've personally witnessed domestic abuse in my own household. I must say I'm not as the perpetrator, as a victim. A long time ago, but it sits with you forever. Not violence, I should add, but abuse, because domestic abuse is not simply violence. It comes in all manner of forms, and with hindsight, I've seen some of them. It stays with you forever. So I can testify, not specifically in relation to that, but in my own problems, how vital face-to-face, individualised support can be. It is literally life-saving. So I would urge the powers that be to respond to the correspondence that we're going to send and provide the funding that is essential so that we can make a huge difference to people's lives. Thank you.
Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Do we have any more speakers? Councillor Cochrane, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to echo other voices. In my day job, I've spoken to many people who have utilised the services of Dawn Project, and I've seen the incredible benefit that it gives to many people across Worcester. I'm pleased to hear that some funding may be coming through the Police and Crime Commissioner's office, although it, compared to John Campion's budget for next year of £288 million, it feels a little bit like crumbs from the table. Perhaps if his office didn't exist, there might actually be proper funding for on-the-ground support for victims of crime. I'm not sure that I would recommend the Managing Director to include that in his letter to John Campion, though.
Councillor Cochrane, thank you. Do we have any more speakers? No, I think everyone has spoke very eloquently on this topic. Thank you. And if we can move to the vote, all those in favour? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you. If we move on to the final motion of the evening, and it's freedom of the city for key workers, and it's being proposed by Councillor Mays. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So March 2025 will be the 5th anniversary of the first COVID-19 lockdown. COVID killed over 230,000 people in the UK, including hundreds in our city, with local carers, local NHS staff and local key workers in the front line for exposure. The lockdowns in 2020 and 2021 affected our communities deeply, and during this time of deep anxiety, sadness and loss, it was the key workers from the public, private and voluntary sectors that kept working and kept people alive. I am personally lucky that neither I nor anyone in my extended family needed hospital support through the pandemic, but thanks, of course, go to NHS workers and everyone else who this motion seeks to recognise. I'm sure there are many members here who have had their own experiences of how key workers supported them through the lockdowns and wider pandemic that they feel merits consideration for freedom of the city. For me, I personally want to recognise the staff at St Barnabas C Primary School, who came in and educated my children while my wife went to work at the Hive on providing library services throughout the second and third lockdowns. Thank you in particular to Mrs Sheen, Miss Merritt, Mrs Beasley, Mrs Hanson and all the other staff at St Barnabas who went above and beyond to keep children safe and to support other key workers being able to work through the lockdowns. Thank you to all of the City and County Council staff who kept crucial services running, and thank you to all of the healthcare workers who ran the vaccination programme. An exhaustive list is simply not possible, but these are all the areas that directly affected me personally. But my gratitude to every single key worker, whether I encountered them or not, remains the same. I am aware that this council has previously thanked key workers via a motion passed in September 2020, proposed by Councillors Gregson and Stephen, and the then leader of the council. And that Councillor Gregson hosted a special banquet as Mayor in 2022 that gave thanks to a number of organisations in Worcester who had contributed to the wellbeing of residents through the period 2020 to 2022. This motion seeks to build on that recognition by permanently recording our gratitude and support of those key workers, including carers and NHS employees, by agreeing now that they have provided a towering, eminent service to Worcester that is at least equal to that given by many of the names and organisations that we have previously granted freedom of the city to. Later in this meeting, we will be voting on renewing the Armed Forces Covenant. This rightly renews our commitment to people who volunteer their service to defend the nation. There is a parallel to be struck with the dedication and sacrifice of Worcester's key workers through the pandemic. Indeed, there will be cases locally where key workers contracted COVID through their work and have had their lives irrevocably changed through long COVID or by succumbing to the disease. These are the people who have diligently performed their role, defended the nation from COVID and allowed others to shelter at home without expecting that to be a role they would have to perform when they took the job, yet they did it anyway. I would like to talk a little bit about the practicalities of granting freedom of the city to a set of people that don't have a representative to accept the honour. Our protocol for awarding freedom of the city is that the formal motion to grant freedom is done at an extraordinary council meeting with a special ceremony where the scroll is presented to the recipient. Officers have already kindly suggested that this could be done, if the Mayor would agree, on March 25th, when full council is already scheduled to minimise costs and extra commitments from members. This is also close to the anniversary of the first lockdown. The scroll could be presented during the extraordinary council and then hung in the Guildhall with simple paper copies available for anyone who was a key worker, carer or NHS employee who would like one. This is similar to what other councils have done, such as the Labour-led South Tyneside, but this motion leaves it open for those details to be considered by the Mayor, officers and the Civic Office. I'm proposing this motion now to give time for those details to be worked out before the anniversary in March. I have heard some concerns that key workers simply covers too many people and it is impractical to grant freedom to so many people. I don't personally agree. These are solvable problems that other councils have dealt with. Representatives from relevant bodies like the Hospital Trust, Clinical Commissioning Group, City Council, County Council, caring groups can be invited to receive the scroll. The meeting itself can be ticketed to control numbers with the meeting live streamed, as this meeting is, for those who are unable to attend. Copies of the certificate can be available on a limited basis or require a nomination, as other councils have done. Voting against this simply on the basis of practicality represents a lack of imagination. And if the potential number of recipients does represent a significant part of the city, I would say you're a braver person than me to tell them that their service during the pandemic is not eminent enough to overcome practicality problems. I'd like to finish on 2 points. First, we have never, in 200 years of awarding freedom of the city, awarded it to a woman or any group that contains women. In awarding Freedom City to key workers, including carers and NHS workers, we should recognise that women were disproportionately affected by the pandemic and that it is a first step in correcting the lack of women on our role of Freedom of the City. I would certainly welcome the opportunity to grant Freedom of the City to individual women in future. Secondly, the response to the COVID-19 pandemic shows that the government can move heaven and earth when necessary, and we need that urgency when dealing with the climate emergency. I hope that everyone here can support this motion so that from evermore, anyone visiting the Guildhall can see our recognition of key workers, carers and NHS workers for their dedication and sacrifice during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Councillor Mace, thank you. I understand Councillor Kinnersley, you're seconding.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do second this motion and I reserve the right to speak later. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak in this motion? Councillor Lamb, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been a pretty consensual meeting until this point, I'm afraid, and clearly I'm either a brave man or someone lacking in imagination, because I'm afraid I will be not supporting this motion. And I just need to say right from the start, I'm not seeking to diminish or devalue in any way the extraordinary efforts of key workers during COVID, but to raise practical, procedural and symbolic concerns about this proposal. And before I set out my arguments, I just want to point out that I, along with other members of this council, was a key worker during COVID. Whilst my college was closed during the first and third lockdown, we continued to teach and support both staff and students and parents online. And during the second lockdown, the college was open, and so I and my staff, we taught wearing masks in socially distanced classrooms. We risked our health during this difficult time. So I experienced firsthand the challenges of COVID. So why am I urging council to oppose this motion? First, we must consider the practical implications of this proposal, and we do have to consider them. The Freedom of the City is one of the highest honours a city can bestow. It is a symbol of exceptional service and a way of singling out individuals or groups whose contributions stand above and beyond the norm. To extend this honour to all key workers, a vast and diverse category that includes millions of individuals nationwide and thousands within Worcester, dilutes its significance. How would this even be implemented? Would it be possible to identify and verify every individual key worker within the city boundaries? What criteria would be used to determine eligibility, especially given the varying definitions of key worker? I mean, I've heard nothing so far that has convinced me that that has been thought through. And a well-meaning idea quickly becomes unmanageable in practice. And secondly, let us consider the procedural fairness of this decision. Whilst it is true that many key workers made extraordinary sacrifices, we must recognise that not all contributions were equal. Some workers, such as nurses in COVID wards, risked their lives daily. Others, while still providing essential services, did not face the same degree of personal danger or stress. By treating every key worker as though their contributions were identical, we risk undermining the unique and heroic efforts of those who truly went above and beyond. You know, I did my bit. You know, do I deserve the freedom of Worcester or the freedom of West Brom where I work? No, I don't think I do, to be honest with you. And there are other ways to honour all key workers collectively, without undermining the personal recognition deserved by some. Third, we must think about the symbolism of this action. The Freedom of the City is traditionally reserved for individuals or groups whose contributions are exceptional and specific to the city. By extending this honour to an enormous group, we risk undermining the very meaning of the award. Would future recipients view it as a distinction if it has been given so broadly? Honours must be selective to maintain their prestige. Instead of granting the Freedom of the City to all key workers, we could consider a more focused and symbolic gesture, such as commissioning a memorial or organising an annual day of gratitude to recognise the collective effort. If you take St John's, for example, myself, Councillor Udall and Councillor Norfolk, we paid for an orchard, which is in Lawnbrook, which is designed to remember those victims of COVID. Finally, let us remember that recognition is only meaningful when accompanied by real support. If we truly want to honour key workers, let's focus on ensuring better pay, working conditions and long-term investment in essential sectors like health and education. You know, memories are very short. I remember everyone clapping, rightly, NHS workers on a Thursday. But once COVID was over, the last government, suddenly those doctors, those teachers, those train drivers who suddenly wanted a pay increase went from being brave Stakhanovites to being grasping and greedy. And I have to say, it's taken having a Labour government to actually solve some of these pay issues and to give these vital workers the pay and the money and the conditions that they deserve. So empty symbolic gestures, however well-intentioned, do little to address the systemic challenges that workers face. Let us not mistake a grand but impractical gesture for meaningful action. In conclusion, I urge you to oppose this motion, not because I lack gratitude for key workers, far from it, but because we must honour them in ways that are practical, fair and impactful. Let us not dilute the prestige of the freedom of the city, but instead find ways to recognise their contributions that are both inclusive and sustainable. Thank you.
Councillor Lamb, thank you. And Councillor Wormald.
It feels slightly odd to reflect back on events 5 years ago, which now seem like a long time ago. But I remember March 2020 very well. Due to our knowledge from colleagues in London of what was already happening in their hospitals, and before any government direction, we were preparing to shut down services as safely as possible and triaging who our most urgent patients were to make sure that we could get them through on time. When, to our utter astonishment, the Cheltenham Festival went ahead, we spent Gold Cup Day reviewing the Trust's pandemic plans. Our department would become the mortuary. By the end of the next week, the first patients, all racegoers, were arriving in Cheltenham ED. Elaine, he looked like a smurf, said one of my colleagues from the respiratory team who attended a patient before he was ventilated. Such was the colour of his skin. I'm not a respiratory clinician, and I wasn't working in red areas. The team of advanced practitioners I led supported the trauma clinic and the trauma wards. Lots of people doing DIY and dual wicks caused us some problems. We also manned what we bleakly referred to as the suicide hotline. People who'd already been waiting months in agony for treatment, telling us that if we couldn't do something, that they were going to end their lives. Treatments that were usually available to us were being cautioned against due to their immunosuppressive effects. There were nights where I'd come home and down 2 glasses of wine before I'd even taken off my coat. With 2 key worker parents, our children were in school as part of the key worker provision. In the first lockdown, out of over 400 children, 10 of them were in school. They called themselves the COVID clan. Being a key worker across 20 and 21 was really hard, but this motion, I'm afraid, is misguided. And before we see a trademark Green Party strawman letter in the Worcester News that accuses Labour councillors of hating key workers, allow me to elaborate why this motion is ill-conceived, ill-thought through and unimplementable. Over the pandemic, nearly everyone suffered. For millions of people, it was the worst period of their life. Parents pushed to breaking point as they tag-teamed in 2-hour shifts between 6 AM to 9 PM to homeschool and look after children whilst trying to do their own jobs, but they weren't key workers. Under this motion, key workers who were absented from work to look after their kids while their special educational needs school was closed would be given freedom of the city, but not non-designated key worker parents whose kids had no daycare or respite for months, left on their own to cope, would not. Many people with extra time on their hands while they were on furlough rallied around for their communities, sorting out food deliveries for shielding and vulnerable people or NHS staff on 12-hour shifts who couldn't get to the supermarket, organising driveway conversations with neighbours who were lonely to the point of despair, coordinating laptop or tablet donations to kids who didn't have them, none of them key workers. The guy who dressed up as Spider-Man and did gymnastics in the streets for kids just to put a smile on their faces, not a key worker. It wasn't just key workers who kept people going through the pandemic. Where is the recognition in this motion for all those people who went above and beyond, who don't fall within the definition of a key worker, whatever that definition may even be? By the winter lockdown of 2021, kids in our school who were part of the key worker provision had risen from the COVID Clan 10 to over 200, as the definition was expanded. Parents were also begging for their children to be allowed into school due to their deteriorating mental health. Children who've never received any formal recognition of what they had to forego: birthday parties, dance lessons, the rite of passage of exams and leavers assemblies, cuddles with granny, and much more. I understand this motion is largely symbolic, as was the awarding of the George Cross to the NHS in 2023. But the sheer numbers of sectors and individuals who contributed to the community effort to get through the pandemic will render it meaningless. I'm also uncomfortable with the glorification of key workers and the outgroup othering of those who aren't to be recognised by this motion, regardless of the contributions that they made. So on its vagueness, its impracticality, and its implication of a hierarchy of worthiness, I struggle to see its value. If Council were to reflect on the legacy of COVID, I would much prefer to see that platform used to focus on what could be done to support people in this city whose lives have been completely derailed by long COVID. I have a friend whose child has barely been in school for 3 years due to being incapacitated by it. Awareness is poor, judgment is rife, provision is scant, and charities had to fight to even have their voices heard at the COVID inquiry. So in summary, this is the wrong motion at the wrong time, focusing on the wrong thing. And for those things, as a key worker, I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Winmore, thank you. And Councillor Rudge, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I fully appreciate the sentiment that Councillor Mace is bringing forward with this motion. And I do feel very strongly that health workers did do a fantastic job, and they put themselves on the line day after day at great risk to their own health. My wife she works on the intensive care unit. I think she said PPE they had to wear for about 2 years, extremely uncomfortable, very unpleasant. But I asked her about this, and she said, well, the trouble is, it's not clear who you'd be supporting exactly. And she said, for example, there were some line managers who didn't come onto the unit once, who didn't ever put on PPE, who didn't really show any support when it mattered most. And she said, if it's too broad and they were included, for example, she said, then that would devalue the purpose. And she said that for them that would not be a joke, but it would have lost its value. Some departments actually had very little to do when other departments, I think Councillor Lamb put this very well, A&E, for example, were actually incredibly quiet, whereas intensive care was incredibly busy. So I appreciate the sentiment, but I think it's extremely difficult to decide who exactly we're supporting. And I think we could be more precise. I think there is a way of doing it, but it could be more precise. Again, I obviously always listen to my wife and follow what she says very carefully. But she did say, look, if you really wanted to support us, could you please campaign for us to have free car parking? Because I find it's a terrible indictment on our society that we ask people to go to work and risk their lives at times, but insist on them paying for the privilege of parking to save our lives. It makes no sense to me. I don't understand that. I think there's a mistake, there's a flaw in the system, and at some point someone has to say, can we target this problem and resolve it and show that we care about the people who care about us? And so whilst, like I say, I really do appreciate the sentiment of the motion, I think there are other things we could do that specifically targets the people who contributed most and risked most, that they would appreciate more than this gesture. Thank you.
Councillor Rudge, thank you. And Councillor Stephen.
How soon we forget. If we'd been having this motion maybe 6 months or 9 months after the start of the pandemic, when everyone was clapping and everyone could see what was going on and the depth of what was going on. At the time, there was no vaccine, there was very limited PPE, and there were people going into hospitals and care home settings and emptying our bins and doing a whole series of things which kept our society moving. And they often went into their not knowing what the consequences would be, and they put their own lives at risk and probably the lives of their families as well. And they were coming home with perhaps the risk of bringing home the virus back to their family. We can argue about the details, and if you want to start to define exactly who is and who isn't, then of course you will have a situation where people will then say, well, why wasn't in there and why I wasn't. But I think that's what, by going down into the level of that, down into the weeds of the detail, you are artificially then creating a situation where you are deciding who is worthy and who isn't worthy. The purpose of this motion is to acknowledge all those who have put their lives on the line. And I think it's as simple as that. And I think it's within the wit of ourselves to be able to create a form of words which is inclusive, that would allow that to happen. I think that is eminently possible to do. I would urge other people to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Stephen, thank you. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Mayor. So much of life is about gestures, and it's a matter of opinion whether they're empty or not. Councillor Rudge mentioned campaigning instead of motions. However, they're not mutually exclusive. For example, you can celebrate Christmas and campaign for Palestine at the same time. Councillor Lamb spoke of freedom of the city as the highest honour the council can bestow, which is true. He said it is for recognition of exceptional service, which is also true. But I disagree with the view that awarding freedom of the city would dilute its significance. The great man theory is an approach to the study of history popularised in the 19th century, according to which history can be largely explained by the impact of great men or heroes, highly influential and unique individuals who, due to their natural attributes such as superior intellect, heroic courage, extraordinary leadership abilities or divine inspiration, have a decisive historical effect. The theory is primarily attributed to a chap called Thomas Carlyle. Edward Palmer Thompson, otherwise known as E.P. Thompson, was an English historian, writer, socialist and peace campaigner. He is best known for his historical work, The Making of the English Working Class, and E.P. Thompson passed away in 1993 in nearby Rushwick. He wrote of history from the bottom up. History from the bottom up is about telling the stories of those in the past who had no voice, about breathing life into the lives of ordinary people. History is not always about great men or great deeds. Freedom of the city for key workers wouldn't be an empty gesture. It would be a permanent reminder of their story and a permanent symbol of our collective gratitude. It would also be a celebration of ordinary people who carried out extraordinary service. I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Lawrenson, thank you. Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Mayor. I find the argument that you can't decide who is most deserving of this award really shocking. My uncle Ray, who would have been 100 this year, was stationed in a submarine off Malta and did not take part in action, but he is still viewed as a veteran and could go on marches and stand up for everybody else. My grandfather was in a mortar, was hit by a mortar, was in a crater for 3 days and lost his leg. Would you say that my grandfather was more deserving than my uncle? No. Both of them risked their lives and could have suffered death or, mortifying injuries. And their service to the country is recognised equally. And that is definitely the case here too. Thank you.
Councillor Lewin, thank you. And I'm conscious we're sort of Councillor Kinnersley at the back, but I'm also conscious that we are covering the same topics over and over, so if we can keep it brief or make new points and not sort of duplicate existing ones, please. Thank you. So I've got Councillor Collier next. Thanks.
I will try really hard not to duplicate. I am echoing something there, just because in spring and summer 2020, I was still working in London as a deputy head teacher in a school in an area of deprivation, and many of our children's parents were, because of our proximity to a major London hospital, were cleaners, were nurses, were doctors, And I feel really strongly that the experiences following that initial lockdown have, I believe, somewhat diluted and distorted our feelings and our recollections of just how terrifying that time was. We were being told daily how dangerous things were and how many people were dying from the daily briefing, and how remote the possibility of a vaccine was. And parents were arriving at school and they were saying to me, "You don't understand, they're all so unwell, they're all dying," as they left their child to go off and do another shift for us there. They were listening to those messages, digesting them, and then going out to do their job. I really think that this needs reflecting on when considering this motion. I do think we can be imaginative enough to deal with the logistics and the practicalities here, and for those reasons I'm supporting this motion.
Councillor Collier, thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to speak, but my husband was at the testing centre for most of the period of COVID, and my son worked in a care home, minimum wage, and when hospitals let out people with COVID, about a third of the people in that care home died. And he had to look after them, or not be able to look after them, because he wasn't allowed to be in the same room as them. What I would like is for the motion to be withdrawn so that we can actually have a proper job of getting something that is fit for purpose for our community, that does recognise all the passion that we feel, the love we feel for the carers and all the other people involved, so we can actually make something really decent out of this. Because it's obvious that we all care, but I don't think this particular motion does the job. So I would ask that it is actually withdrawn so we can do something better. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes, thank you. Councillor Kinnersley.
Thank you, Mayor. And firstly, I just want to say thank you to all those who've shared so eloquently some very personal memories. We all have them, and it's indicative of the magnitude of what we all experienced all those years ago. And it's not easy to sort of share those emotions. So thank you for that. I'm very impressed by what Councillor Barnes has said. I mean, this was a global pandemic. It was massive. You know, we know this, we can remember this. To my mind, it is worthy of, there's contradiction in what I'm hearing from people. On the one hand, this is a massive deal that we had to get through somehow, or not in tragic cases, but we can't bestow the highest honour. I don't understand why they're contradictory positions, it seems to me. Yes, let's do other things as well, definitely. But surely there needs to be a way that the City Council has it on its records, on its scrolls, on its official paraphernalia and records that this event happened and that we recognised it 5 years after the event. So surely we can pass this motion and then go on and say, right, okay, and we'll do some other, other things that people feel is fitting in other respects. And in terms of one of the points that someone has raised, that there'd be resentment. Well, why wasn't I honoured? I don't think people will think that at all. If people will think, yes, we are recognising this. It's taking us back to 5 years ago, and 5 years we were clapping. I can remember standing and hearing the clapping echoing round Worcester, and it was a very moving moment. And I don't think there'll be resentment that it's the wrong thing to do. How can it be the wrong thing to do? Okay, so that is why I'm seconding this motion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kinnersley, thank you. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support this motion and also to focus on what the practical matters we can achieve, or what we can do to support hospital workers and others whose working conditions are not fair. For example, as our member said about the hospital parking, and the congestion up by the hospital. So these are very important practical matters. Those who know me will know I like to get stuck in with practical things, but I wholeheartedly embrace the sentiment and this motion.
Councillor Cross, thank you. Councillor Denham.
Thank you. I hadn't particularly planned to speak. Living through COVID is not something that we have forgotten, any of us, and for many people in this room, it's been life-changing and completely traumatising. This motion is not the appropriate way to approach that. It talks about representatives and possibly collecting a scroll and possibly this. How is that to be chosen? What is the purpose? What is the meaning of a scroll? And you know, many of the individuals that were key workers that delivered services in Worcester have changed roles or have moved around since. The very nature of health service provision actually, you know, a high proportion of the staff are regarded as in training and rotate around. The member who was a head teacher down in London. So is that someone who is a key worker in Worcester? Maybe some of the people who were heads in Worcester or deputy heads are no longer here. We have a memorial already, it has been mentioned with regard to the orchard, and actually the other one, memorial, which hasn't been mentioned, is the mural up at the acute hospital at Worcestershire Hospital, which is a beautiful floral decoration piece of art, and remembers those actually who gave their lives during COVID, and in particular people who worked in our health services here in Worcester and came from abroad, foreign workers who lost their lives in the service of our country and looking after our relatives and our citizens. And thanks to Worcester Mellor, who promoted that and brought that about and in partnership. That is a tangible memorial that people can go to and that is there for quiet time and in a space within the hospital. That is a place of memory and recognition of the sacrifice that people made.
Thank you, Councillor Denham. And I think we have Councillor Udall.
Like Councillor Barnes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Like Councillor Barnes, I had no intention of speaking tonight and listen to this motion with growing alarm, because what I fear is an attempt to create division here rather than create unity. Nobody on this side of the chamber has any doubt that the key workers in this city deserve recognition. They do, all of them. What is in doubt is the way we pay tribute. Like Councillor Barnes, I would invite members opposite to consider this motion and withdraw it, so we can actually get together, work together, cooperate together, and find a way which we can actually move forward together with recognition for all those people who served and all those people who died and for all those people who need the recognition as a result of what happened 4 years ago. I ask for cooperation, not confrontation. I ask for your support to actually achieve progress on this, and the only way to do that is to withdraw this motion.
Councillor Mace, you have the right to reply to propose the motion.
Yeah, thank you very much. First off, thank you very much for all the stories that everyone's shared. It's very touching to hear how COVID has touched everybody's lives, and it has made a big difference to everybody. I think I'm slightly confused about the idea about we don't know who a key worker is, because the motion does say who this is. It's the UK government defined key workers as those whose work was critical to the COVID-19 response. So, you know, if a government definition is good enough for the government, it's good enough for me. So, you know, like I said, I'm confused about where that comes from. I would certainly be sympathetic to the idea of withdrawing the motion, but it was published, I think, a week ago, and I've not had any communications or any suggestions from anybody about any way it could be improved. I would be happy to hear any amendments, but I've not heard those things. You know, the idea of tokenism, or whether it has meaning. I mean, gestures and tokens, they have the meaning that we imbue them with. I mean, this room is full of tokens and things that we have imbued meaning to. There's the mayor's chain, the sword, you know, the white ribbons people are wearing, the lists of clerks and chamberlains, etc. They're all in this room that record the history of what's happened in this city. And the intent of this motion is simply to record in the Guildhall, you know, a central point that many people come to, and see the list of freedom of the city, and that we recognise the contributions of key workers and carers and NHS employees. I must admit I'm surprised to hear that's a controversial idea. In terms of what the scroll is, to answer Councillor Denham's question, I mean, that's part of the process of granting freedom of the city, that there is a scroll that says what's happened and it is presented to the recipient. As I said, other councils have presented copies of that. And again, this is not a novel idea. It's not something I've just thought of at the back of my head, or off the top of my head, and thought, that's a good idea, let's do that. I don't know if anyone's ever implemented this ever before. But like I said, other councils have done this, including Labour-led councils. So I am, again, it's not beyond the wit of man to figure out how we do these things. And there will be plenty of people, you know, as there are plenty of key workers who, for them, if they're granted freedom of the city, it will mean nothing. They will think that they have not done anything special, when, to me, I think that they have indeed done something special. But there will also be people who, having this granted to them, will mean everything. And if it means that we grant some people who don't care about it, well, you know, that's just the cost of doing business as far as I'm concerned. It's the same as when we give, I would rather 100 people receive a benefit that they don't need and one person gets it, so that they're not living with the anxiety of wondering how to pay their bills. So, you know, to me, I would still say, I would hope that everyone can support this motion. It's not a token, and we're doing our best. So thank you very much.
Councillor Mace, thank you. And I think if we can move to the vote now. All those in favour? And all those against? The motion is lost.
Any abstentions?
Any abstentions, actually? Okay, thank you. The motion remains lost. We're going to just take a short comfort break for 10 minutes, if that's okay. Thank you. Back for 9 o'clock. Thanks. mention, as we go through the later section, these are referral reports. We do run a committee system, so they are essentially yes, okay. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So as we were, my best hopes for 9 o'clock, but never mind. Yeah, so agenda item 8, it's the South Worcestershire Local Development Scheme, and Councillor Norfolk is going to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I will, in the interest of time, be as brief as I possibly can, thereby wasting time by saying that. The Local Development Scheme is a project management tool. It's there to remind us of where we are in the planned development process and future actions. Just briefly then, there is a slight error in the report. Paragraph 3.4 implies that the inspection will take place in February and March next year. The appendix is correct. It will only take place in March. We have, under advice from the inspectors, stopped developing a travellers and travelling persons development plan. That's because inspectors feel at the moment that the provisions under the SWDPR provide for that. We will know more post-inspection. And then finally, the appendix contains a plan for the community infrastructure levy plan, which will be developed following the inspection. I'm happy to take any questions, but finally, I'd just like to thank officers for putting the report together, and I do thoroughly recommend the paper and the recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Norfolk, thank you. Councillor Cooper, you'd like to second?
Thank you, Mayor. In the interest of brevity, I formally second this motion.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, if we... Oops, sorry, all those happy to approve? That's unanimous, thank you. Next we have agenda item 9, and that is the renewal of the Armed Forces Community Covenant, and it is going to be proposed by Councillor Agar. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have the honour to propose that the Council signs the new Armed Forces Covenant this evening. And while I'm about it, may I commend Claire Chaplin for her deceptively simple report, which you'll see from the detail is underpinned by a good deal of work and research. So thank you, Claire. The original Armed Forces Covenant was in fact voluntary, and I was a signatory to the County Council's original version, as of course was Councillor Alan Amos. And I'm sure he remembers it well as I do. The key difference between the two is that we now have statutory obligations. The Armed Forces Act, and by extension the Armed Forces Covenant, states that we should pay attention to any disadvantage and seek to mitigate that. Any disadvantage that a member of the Armed Forces or a veteran, an Armed Forces veteran, is experiencing. It's the key provision really of the Act itself, and that's stated at the in the appendix as a key guiding principle of the Covenant. There are, in the appendix, that Covenant, you will see 8 pledges. Most of them, the first 7 are relatively generic. They're the kind of things that should go into a covenant of this kind. We've added an 8th local one, which is to continue to provide conferences for armed forces and veterans. Of the Armed Forces Covenant Partnership Officer. So we're pleased to include that. I'm proud to say that the Council is already very veteran aware and does a great deal for our veterans, and I'm sure we will continue to grow our offer to them in line with this covenant. You'll see there's quite a lot of work to be done. We've already done a lot, but there is more. I'm afraid you don't see members of the Worcestershire Regiment here tonight. The Worcestershire Regimental Association is meeting tonight, so is the Royal British Legion, and I'm afraid most of our veterans are elsewhere. On another occasion, let's hope they're not. The freedom of the city, obviously, is something that the Worcestershire Regiment has had for many years, and they know, and along with all the other armed forces organisations that I work with, know that we are proposing this evening, and I've had some very nice messages back about how pleased they are to see us doing this. I mean, among the things that we've done in the last 18 months, the then Mayor Adrian Gregson and I went to Belgium to inaugurate a new memorial to the Worcestershire Regiment, the 2nd Battalion, for their gallantry at the Battle of Galluvelt. And the Belgians, as you know, came back to visit us this year in October. Our community engagement team did a huge amount of work last year on the commemoration of D-Day, and they are continuing to work this year on what we should do, the commemoration, and no doubt a party to commemorate the veterans, the Armed Forces veterans coming home after the Second World War. So we'll be commemorating Victory in Europe Day, a quieter commemoration for VJ Day because of the implications of dropping atomic bombs on Japan. But I think a party for VE Day. So they do a huge amount of work. We already do a great deal. So I pay tribute to everything that they're doing. We do have a number of veterans who are employed by us. Our own Rob McCarthy, who is a senior mayor's officer, and a naval veteran, and a hallkeeper, of course, who does so much here for the council and for our veterans too, and has been a big support to me, along with Claire, in making sure these conferences happen. A past mayor's sword bearer, Mr. Frank Southam, whose portrait hangs outside the mayor's parlour, was a Royal Air Force veteran. He brought a lot of dignity, good humour, and generally did a wonderful, it was a wonderful role for him. And I think a lot of veterans are drawn to ceremonial roles with us. He performed it with grace. Moving on, we've often been grateful for their other skills as well. I can still remember Rob McCarthy facing up to and calming down a rather irate gentleman after a licensing subcommittee, and I think, Louis, you will remember this one. He was very good at calming him down and getting him out of here and ensuring he didn't actually bother a witness, who was actually blind, in fact, or assault our officer. So, you know, these skills matter to us. They have organisational skills. They have a range of transferable skills that we're very grateful to have. We don't yet have a register of all the veterans who work for us, but I expect we will in the near future. Customer services carries information for our armed forces and veterans. If you want to signpost the Veterans Hub, local Veterans Hub, that is Stepway, and you'll find them on, they've got a great website if you need to find them, or our customer services will help you find them. As I've said, we are very veteran aware. Our housing service is currently looking at an e-learning module that has been provided by the Armed Forces Covenant. So we're looking at how we comply with the Act in a whole variety of ways. And so I pay tribute to all the staff members involved in this work, and above all, the leadership that the council itself has been able to show. I urge you to support the signing of the new Armed Forces Covenant so that we as a council can comply properly with the Armed Forces Act and support all of our armed forces and veterans who contribute so much to the life of this country and our city and this council. Thank you.
Councillor Agar, thank you. And as chair, I will be seconding the motion. And to sort of practice what I preach, I will be brief and just say thank you to the officers. Thank you to Councillor Pat Agar for being our Armed Forces champion, and thank you to all veterans. And would anyone like to speak? No? Okay, if we can move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Next we move on to agenda item 10, and we've got two. So we've got 10.1, which is the referral report from Audit and Governance, and that's proposed by Councillor Lawrenson. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I think an audit update is notoriously quite dull, so please bear with me. I'm sure we're gasping to go to the parlour, but I think there are some important things I really ought to highlight verbally as a cover note for the report that we've all had. So firstly, I'd like to publicly thank officers and Councillor Lamb for their hard work and support in relation to the Audit and Governance Committee, which I've only chaired since July this year. May, I can't remember now. Further to what is written in the annual report regarding external audits for 2021-2022 and 2022-2023, the Audit and Governance Committee discussed their incomplete audits at its most recent committee meeting on 3rd of December. Within the covering report titled Statement of Accounts 21-22 and 22-23 at that meeting, so I'm referring to a report last week, it was stated that as part of new legislation to ensure that accounts are completed and that both new auditors and councils can look towards the future, a deadline has been set by the government of the 13th of December this year, by which all work has to be undertaken and signed off. Therefore, at last week's committee meeting, we were required to approve so-called disclaimed accounts to meet the deadline, which wasn't particularly satisfactory, and that point was made. As is stated in this evening's report, the Council's external auditor for 23-24 is a different provider called Assets. A briefing for members of the Audit and Governance Committee on the 23-24 draft statement of accounts has just been arranged for next February. I'd also like to note that the Council's internal audit plan for 24-25 was approved by the committee on the 10th of July, and that the plan is on track to be delivered. Finally, also as discussed at last week's committee meeting, an independent external quality assessment of the Council's audit service was completed last May. The results confirmed that the service is operating in general conformance to the standards, which, despite its lacklustre terminology, is the highest standard that you can achieve. Therefore, I would like to repeat my thanks to officers in the audit team, and I look forward to meeting more members of the team in person next week. Thank you for bearing with me, and sorry for messing up dates. Cheers.
Councillor Lawrenson, thank you. And Councillor Lamb, I believe you're seconding.
Yes, I'd like to formally second as Vice Chair this report.
Okay, thank you. And this item is for noting, so there is no vote required. So if you have no more comments, I'll move on. Okay, so you've got item 10.2, and it's the referral report from Licensing and Environmental Health Committee, which is being proposed by Councillor Udall.
Thank you, Mayor. You woke me up then. Thank you. Thank you for, the proposal in front of you. This report comes to council every 3 years. We have to go out to consultation, and we have done so, and we received 10 responses. Most of the responses were objections on moral grounds to gambling and calling for it to be banned, which is not something which we can do or even entertain as a licensing authority. The few changes which have been made as a result of the consultation are mostly about grammatical errors and changes such as that, and they are listed on paragraph 3.10 in the appendix. One or two members have indicated to me that there are one or two other grammatical errors within the report. When they are found, they will be corrected as well. But in the meantime, this report is here for your adoption tonight, and I formally move. Thank you.
Councillor Udall, thank you. And Councillor Holmes, with your seconding.
I'd be delighted to. Thank you.
Thank you. And any comments or questions? No, so if we can move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. So next, if we move to, we've got the referral report from the Standards Committee. Is this? Yeah. And this, there was an error in the paper copy, but the online version has been corrected. There was an error with a name, but it has been corrected online. So just to flag that at the beginning. Okay, so, and this is being proposed by Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
And yes, and thank you to Councillor Mace for noticing the error in the paper copy. It's my pleasure to present the annual report of the Standards Committee to the Council this evening. The report reflects the vital work the committee has undertaken over the past year in promoting and upholding high standards of conduct among members, parish councils and officers alike. First, I'd just like to take a moment to extend my thanks to the officers who have supported the work so diligently, in particular our Monitoring Officer Sean Stroud and Deputy Monitoring Officer Claire Chaplin, whose expertise and dedication underpin the effective cooperation of the committee. I also want to acknowledge the contributions of the committee's co-opted independent member and parish council representatives, whose involvement ensure that a wide range of perspectives are considered. I'd like to express my gratitude to the previous chair, Councillor Karen Holmes, and Vice Chair, Councillor Jill Zera, for their leadership during the past year. Their commitment to upholding the principles of accountability and transparency set a strong foundation for this committee's work. This year has seen important developments, including the adoption of a revised code of conduct for members, which reflects best practices from the Local Government Association and updates to our procedures for handling complaints. the committee has also been instrumental in addressing issues of civility and personal safety for councillors, an increasingly pressing concern in public life. The report also highlights the committee's work in reviewing complaints, ensuring that robust mechanisms are in place to maintain trust and accountability. While we've faced challenges such as instances of non-compliance with sanctions, these experiences have provided valuable lessons that will shape future improvements for our procedures. In conclusion, this report demonstrates the committee's steadfast commitment to its core purpose, promoting and maintaining high standards of conduct. I'm proud of the collaborative effort that has gone into achieving this. On behalf of the committee, I respectfully recommend that the Council accepts this report.
Councillor Murray, thank you. And Councillor Ali, you're seconding. Thank you. Okay, thank you. And this item does not require any votes, and so it's just for noting. Thank you. Oh, apologies. please speak, Councillor Amos. I didn't see that.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I just refer to paragraphs 10.3 and 10.4, if I may? And I've just got a question. I have alerted the Chair to the question, but I'm sure she can tackle it quite easily. And referring to paragraphs 10.3 and 10.4, I'm simply referring, Mayor, to the utterly disgraceful behaviour of former Conservative councillor for Bedwardine, Shafaz Ditta, an absentee councillor, and the only councillor who has ever been shamefully kicked off all his committees for non-attendance, never apologising and never being sanctioned or disciplined by his puppet masters, who against my strong advice imposed him on my ward on the good people of Bedwardine, who were shamelessly treated with contempt by him. So my question, Mayor, is in paragraph 10.4, will the hearings subcommittee be reconvened to consider his refusal to apologise on this matter?
I will ask Sean to respond. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. The jurisdiction of the Standards Committee ceases when a councillor ceases to be a councillor. However, at the point where a Standards Committee decision has led to a finding and that recommendation and that action hasn't been taken, that's the point when it reaches the public domain, and that's why it's in the papers for you tonight. The only sanction that's available to you at this stage is to put on record your displeasure, councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That'll do fine.
Thank you. Okay. So we move on to item 10.4. And so we've got the referral report from Policy and Resources Committee, and we've got the review of polling districts, and I've got Councillor Lynn Denham. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So this report was considered at Policy and Resources. The positioning of polling stations and to ensure that they are fully accessible, meet all the technical criteria and make it as easy as possible for our residents to go and vote. All credit to officers for finding some new locations. The ward councillors in each of the wards where there's been any change have been fully consulted. There was a useful debate and approval at Policy and Resources. I urge full council to vote in favour of the recommendations.
Councillor Denham, thank you. And Councillor Stephen, you're seconding. Thank you.
Yes, I formally second that this paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay, if we move... Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Mayor. I completely appreciate the logistical hassle and Excel juggling that has been needed to achieve the balances required. It is frustrating that, try as we might with juggling with our three 3 tiers of local authority in Wandon villages, Leopard Hill ward particularly. We've not managed to achieve coterminosity of the boundaries between parish, city and county. So there are still some residents who are going to be thinking, hang on, who is my councillor? Thank heavens for the online resource of looking this up by entering your postcode. But even then, it's not easy because there's one road which is still divided, not down the middle, but from end to end. So yeah, bit of a challenge, but this is the best that one could make out of the situation. And it's certainly not. I'm certainly not calling for it to be reworked again immediately. But just wanted to put that note of frustration on record.
Councillor Cross, thank you. I mean, obviously we have the Boundary Commission and things are set, and then the council works within those underneath. Yeah, it's okay.
We've got the county one changed, but not city. Thank you.
Thank you. So any more comments? No? Okay, if we're happy to move to the vote, all those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Oh, apologies. Oh, sorry. Apologies.
No, that's fine. Okay. I wish to record an abstention. Thank you.
Okay, so one abstention. And any against? No, none against. So just one abstention. Okay. Thank you. Okay, if we move on to 10.5, and it's the Policy and Resources Committee, it's the Freedom Leisure proposed fees and charges for 2025, and Councillor Denham is proposing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. This referral report actually has the honour of having been through 2 committees. So it was considered at Communities Committees on the 6th of November and at P&R on the 19th of November, which is maybe gives us pause for thought when we look at the governance review and efficiency of decision making. It comes at this, it's within the power of the council to approve or to decide the fees and charges, and for leisure centres, their annual cycle goes with the calendar year, so that all those New Year's resolutions and people who want to sign up to the gym and do lots of swimming can do so in January. I commend this report to colleagues.
Councillor Denham, thank you. And Councillor Stephen, who's your seconding. Thank you. Oh, apologies, it's me. Yes, Councillor Jagger. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to formally second this proposal and all the work that is being done in order to put it in front of us and simply encourage members to support it.
Thank you. And do we have any comments? And in my defence, my notes do say Councillor Stephen. I don't know what's happened there. Yeah, so if we'd like to move to the vote, all those in favour? That is unanimous, thank you. Okay, item 10.6, we have the referral report from Policy and Resources, and it's Gallivant Park Splash Pad, which is being proposed by Councillor Denham.
Thank you, Chair. This again has been through more than one committee. It is about a substantial investment in play in Worcester City. And therefore an adjustment to the capital programme. I think generations of families know and love the splash pad, and its play value is really important to the city. And I'm pleased, a source of funding is available with regard using the community infrastructure levy and section 106. I commend the recommendations to full council, having been through PED and P&R, because it's quite a lot of money. Thank you.
Councillor Denham, thank you. This is being seconded by Councillor Jagger. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I really take a lot of pleasure in seconding this because this is such an important facility for the entire city, and I am so pleased that the council has decided to make an investment in this area because it's important for Claims, but also for all the children across the city, and that we've managed to do that without going into reserves. So yes, please support this item. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Norfolk?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to comment on the fact that this motion or the report actually reflects this council's investment in the play plan and investment in play for children across the city.
Councillor Norfolk, thank you. Any further comments? Okay, if we move to the vote, all those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. And next, if we move on to agenda item 11, report from the Leader of the Council on any matters which they are of the opinion require urgent consideration of the Council. Or Councillor Denham, thank you.
I don't think I've sort of taken advantage of this item on the agenda before. There's always a first time for everything. So 2 items which are brief, not relatively brief, they are brief. It's been brought to my attention that the Christmas tree in St John's is one of the victims of Storm Dara, which has caused distress on the west side of the city, and I have got confirmation this evening that it will be replaced, and that festive cheer will return, and hopefully we won't have any more high winds. So that's the first item. And then the second item that's been brought to my attention is that this is the last full council meeting before Councillor Jaggett goes on maternity leave. I'm really pleased that we now have in place parental leave policy for councillors, just in time so that she can take advantage of this. I'm sure we all wish her well in, say, her confinement. I mean, is that the current language, or is that really, really old terminology? I hope it all goes well, and we very much look forward to her return and of a new little person and lots of baby photos. She's done an excellent job of stepping up to the plate as leader of the Lib Dem group, and I've really valued her contributions in this civic year to date. So all the best, and we look forward to your return.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Denham, thank you. And Councillor Jagger, would you like to say a few words?
I will be very brief. Thank you very much for the good wishes, and I want to say thank you very much for all your support on the remote working motion. I'm so pleased that the government has decided to act on it, and I look forward to that coming through and actually becoming a reality. So thank you very much.
Councillor Jagger.
Sorry, and I forgot to say, in my absence, Councillor Holmes will be taking over as group leader, and Councillor Murray will be taking the plate as deputy group leader. And I'm sure there will be a fantastic team.
Councillor Jagger, thank you. So I think if you move on to any other business, and this is where I invite Councillor Agar, Armed Forces Champion, and David Blake, Managing Director, to step forward to sign the Armed Forces Community Covenant.
An impression of it.
Come on, Mel, get in the,
Do I
get in
need
the
to?
pit. Come on.
Okay, item 13, any exempt issues? We have none. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to wish everyone a lovely Christmas break and best wishes for the new year, and the meeting is now closed. Thank you.